Hello everyone, it's me Bryson P. We have a new camera, a new computer, and a lot better ability to make these videos. So, we're going to get straight into this just like the old days. Why are US military bases so dangerous? This is pretty interesting since I've lived my whole entire life around military bases, and yeah, why are they so dangerous? Let's see what's changed or what they think is the reason. Here we go.
You know, if I go missing, it's because I did this.
Wait, sorry, what was that?
It's because we talked. Like, there's
You're saying if something happened to one of you guys, it's because you did this interview.
If I vanish or he vanished, we're both tracking that, why?
Fort Hood.
I can't tell if you're joking or not.
No.
Soldiers have to make a joke out of it because it's so real. At Fort Hood, you're like, huh, I made it to work and didn't get shot, raped, or freaking killed. I guess it's a good day.
That's a normal joke.
That's a normal joke.
Fort Hood is one of the largest Army bases in the country. It has more than 38,000 active duty soldiers. It's home to 3rd Corps and to 1st Cavalry Division. I mean, the people who are literally fighting ISIS. One of the other things this base is known for, especially more recently, is it's considered by many estimates to be one of the most dangerous bases in the country.
Fort Hood has the highest rates of homicide, aggravated assault, and sexual misconduct Army-wide. And in the past 5 years, more than 160 soldiers based here have died outside of combat. But the story of Fort Hood is representative of a broader problem, an insular military justice system operating independently of the civilian world, where commanders have almost complete control over prosecuting violent crime.
Okay, so right off the gate, I was not expecting this actually to be like this and to start out this serious. So I've heard a lot about Fort Hood, again, because I live in a military community, have always, born and raised and all that. So I've come to know a lot of people that have been to different bases and have been stationed in different places. And also, just from the news and growing up and throughout my lifetime, anytime that events and major news headlines would happen, of course I'd heard about them. Yeah, so I don't know a lot of bases, honestly couldn't tell you. I mean, I know quite a few, but Fort Hood, I would definitely, like, if you gave me a list and said which ones do you think are the worst, I'd probably choose Fort Hood. And that's not just because of this video, it's just from what I've heard and have interacted with my own life, you know what I'm saying?
My sister's a human being! And I want justice! And I want answers!
The problems at this base first came to national attention last year when a 20-year-old soldier named Vanessa Guillen went missing. The Army didn't thoroughly investigate and instead labeled her AWOL, implying she left the base without permission. Her body was found 2 months later. She'd been murdered by a fellow soldier. Vanessa's family is still fighting for answers.
Que están encubriendo a alguien muy grande. Yo para mi justicia que me digan la verdad, que se sepa con detalles por qué pasó eso con mi hija. Y no vamos a parar hasta obtener justicia para que se puedan salvar tantos jóvenes que están escondidos, la mayoría están escondidos sufriendo.
Vanessa isn't alone. 95 soldiers were listed as AWOL at Fort Hood in 2020, including Greg Morales, whose body was found while investigators were still searching for Vanessa. When violent crime is investigated, soldiers say it isn't always taken seriously.
We're in a small town outside Fort Hood. We're visiting a woman who says that she was sexually assaulted while she was serving at Fort Hood. She's staying in this motel right now, and she's really just kind of living VA check to VA check.
Karina was just 19 when she says she was raped at a party after her drink was spiked.
I woke up.
So now I'm curious if this whole video is going to be about Fort Hood or if there's going to be some other bases included into this. Okay, so just in case they don't show any other bases or talk about any other instances, outside of Fort Hood, I do want to bring light to the seriousness of this video. So This was on July 6th, which is maybe just barely over a month ago. We had a Sergeant Sage Gustafson, and this was a post that went out to a lot of the communities around here for a missing soldier that had sent out a concerning text messages to his buddies and then went missing. I honestly don't know if there was ever an update for that. And then we have another one. This is from July 8th at the base that's here local to me. This is all on the local community posts. It was for reaching out to anybody that needed mental health after a NCO had passed away there on the base. Here's another one I found. This actually was posted on August 15th of 2024, so just a couple days ago. And it is that a Fort Campbell soldier has been accused of selling military secrets and pleads guilty. So, a lot of crazy stuff that goes on here. It says that this gentleman received 14 payments totaling a sum of $42,000. He had 6 different counts, including conspiring to obtain and disclose military defense information and bribery of public officials. So, a lot of stuff that goes on, and the seriousness of what's happening here in the military. So, let's continue on and see what else is going on here.
Up the next morning, and I was in his bed, and I personally didn't know what happened. When I got to PT in the morning, my partner next to me said, "Hey, you know you got bruises all over your neck, your body, everything." God. And so I told the NCO, I was like, "I need to go to the hospital." I went, and that's when they confirmed I was raped. After that, they actually had a counselor come in and talk to you and let you know, "Hey, can you tell your story?" And I did, and no one did anything about it.
So nobody followed up with you?
No one. And it kind of just felt me like, okay, did whatever I say go through one ear out the other? Because that's how I felt.
Come on. Karina says she reported her assault up the chain of command. They sent her to SHARP, the Sexual Misconduct Prevention Program, who said they'd report it to CID, the Army's Criminal Investigative Division, but she says nobody was held accountable. Stories like this continue to surface. Last year, the Army did something unprecedented. They brought in an outsider, a former FBI investigator named Chris Swecker, to try to understand how this keeps happening. When you looked at the investigative division, Criminal Investigative Division, CID, were there any agents who you felt were experienced enough to conduct complex homicide or sexual assault investigations?
There were only a couple, and there may have been as low as only one. You know, at one point, 90% of the enlisted CID agents had less than 2 years' experience. And then they had warrant officers, I think somewhere around, at some point, 40 or 50% of them were probationary or apprentice. So that meant that they weren't even credentialed to go out by themselves and do interviews.
In December, Swecker and his team published their findings in an extensive report. The most concerning thing they found dealt with military prosecutors, or JAGs, who were sometimes pressured by commanders to sideline solid criminal cases.
What we saw was a pretty close relationship between military JAG advisors and the commanding officers. So when victims came in, or these cases came in, there seemed to be a deference towards the subject and disposing of the case as quickly as possible.
How do you dispose of a case?
In the military system, there are what I call off-ramps. You can take a set of facts in a case.
I'm going to go ahead and ask this question, and I'm going to assume that I already know the answer here. But just like in our military here in the United States, we have the military criminal justice. You know, the Justice Department for the military is completely separate from the civilian world that I live in. Is it safe to assume that that's the same way in your country? Whatever country it is that you're watching this in, is it safe to assume that that's the same way, that the military law and the military court is separate from the civilian court? I know different laws and stuff, but as far as, you know, how that court and judiciary system works, is it separate like ours?
Case, and you can say there's no prosecution here, and it stops here. That's an opinion that they render early in the process. Second part of it is they can decide that they're going to go administrative instead of court-martial. Court-martial is the military equivalent of a trial. So what we saw was a lot of these cases took the off-ramp before they got to court-martial. And then if they did get to court-martial, more often than not, the cases were lost.
It just seems like at every stage, there are people who are in positions of power who are just tossing cases.
No cases, no problems.
The problems that Swecker identified don't just happen at Fort Hood. Service members have been labeled AWOL under suspicious circumstances on other bases.
That's another one, Fort Bragg. I've heard a lot of bad stuff about that in my ears.
A number of families say their children's deaths weren't properly investigated. And despite a years-long campaign to root out sexual violence, the number of reported assaults has only continued to rise. Military-wide, the conviction rate is less than 5%. And this Marine says after the sergeant who assaulted her confessed, the case was dropped.
This is exactly why fucking females in the military fucking kill themselves. This is exactly why nobody fucking takes us seriously.
While Swecker uncovered these areas of corruption, we tracked down a military insider who's experienced it himself. We're in Richmond, Virginia to meet up with Ben Beliles. He's a retired Air Force JAG who prosecuted cases for about 10 years. He's also represented service members in every branch of the military. And today, for the first time, he's blowing the whistle on what he says is a military-wide problem that allows for cover-ups. Did you ever have an experience where, you felt you had a strong case, you wanted to prosecute it, and the commander said no?
Oh, absolutely. Often these cases were off-ramped into other resolutions or just went away and didn't even discuss it with me, really.
Did you ever come across cases of violent crime where the perpetrator wasn't prosecuted and then their name came up later as having reoffended?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm aware of hundreds of cases like that in the Department of Defense.
Victims of violent crime and their families say, this is a system in all branches of the military that allows for widespread cover-up. Do you feel that that's a fair characterization?
Let me ask you this question, and let me propose this to you. The amount of times that cases get dismissed or dropped, and everything else in the military, is that not, for the most part, similar to how the cases in criminal, the way that a lot of cases and different things happen now because of plea deals and everything else, right? You get all kinds of different deals behind closed doors, and then the next thing you know, you go back to court for whatever reason, and that case is dismissed, or that case is got this going on. I'm going to plead guilty, but you're really getting just a slap on the wrist. There's a lot of things like that happen too. I'm just assuming that this is also because this is strictly in the military, and this is your job, and essentially at the same time, this is like you're being sexually assaulted at work. You're being beaten up at work, and your employer, your healthcare provider, your government, your everything, because that's what the military is to you. They're just turning a blind eye. That really is worse. That's a lot worse. But I'm just making sure that I understand the correlation as far as the actual, like I said, judicial side of it.
The system as it exists today allows for cases to be either covered up, not fully investigated, and made to go away.
So for a family and there are a number of families who dispute the cause of their child's death, the original investigation was poor, the other information is classified, where do they go?
I don't know.
The reports we have heard should disturb everyone.
I am tired of excuses. I am tired of the statement I get over and over from the chain of command. We got this, man, we got this. You don't have it. You're failing us.
A bipartisan group of senators led by Kirsten Gillibrand and Ted Cruz have been fighting for years to fundamentally change the military justice system by allowing independent, trained military prosecutors to decide which serious crimes to prosecute. They're now introducing a new bill that would do this, effectively taking the prosecution of violent crime out of the chain of command.
And that's the other issue, and that's, I guess, part of what I'm not understanding of what they were saying earlier, as far as how a lot of the people that are part of CID, they're not even really properly trained, or they've only been there for less than 2 years, or they don't have enough training yet. They're still, part of field training and whatnot. And so these types of people, you can't expect them to take your life serious, or to have that type of foresight and understanding and training and being there long enough to be a good enough prosecutor to handle these types of things. And so then it just kind of gets, again, whatever, and then here we are.
But the military's top brass is resistant to this reform. During our investigation, the Army granted us an interview with the man tasked with turning around Fort Hood, Major General John Richardson.
I've heard from experts, including veterans, who have said the future of the U.S. Army really hinges on what you're able to accomplish here. Would you agree?
We've had a trust deficit with our soldiers, and that's really what we're focused on here at Fort Hood, is rebuilding that trust with our soldiers, their families, and by extension, the American people.
Bipartisan congressional leaders, as you know, have been asking for the power to be taken out of the chain of command, and they really feel like independent investigators, prosecutors should really be prosecuting crimes within the military. What is the pushback from the military?
The chain of command is central to good order and discipline in a military organization. And so we entrust the commanders at every level to enforce good order and discipline. And once you take that away from the commander and put it into the hands of an outside agency, you've already are demonstrating a lack of trust from the American people to the military.
I think a lot of people would say the chain of command commanders have proven that they cannot do this, that they cannot self-police their own soldiers. And I guess at what point do they no longer earn that privilege to be able to self-police?
It really comes down to commanders demonstrating through their actions that they will take action and then hold other leaders accountable. Some have some bad habits but can change, and then there'll be some that don't change, and they will have to go because they'll be cancerous.
Attention! In response to the allegations in this story, the Army said they encourage all soldiers to voice their safety concerns, that they voluntarily publish the results of punishment for sex crimes, and monitor the status of active cases. 2 decades of combat and the PTSD that comes with it will make this job harder. This is a generation of leaders that's been trained to go to war, not prioritize the health and safety of its soldiers. After our interview, the Army did fire or suspend 14 service members. They've promised to investigate missing persons cases, no longer labeling them AWOL, and even canceled training rotations, showing how they'll prioritize the well-being of their soldiers. But so far, lower-ranking soldiers are skeptical.
Since Vanessa Guillen's death, there have been reforms that have been introduced. Are they working?
There's half measures and then there's just hollow gestures, and that's often what happens is people are so preoccupied with trying to make the program look good that they don't actually worry about how to make the program run properly.
So you're calling bullshit on these reforms?
All of it. I've seen it all before. A soldier gets raped, have a sharp class. Okay, we had a sharp class, rape doesn't exist anymore, goodbye.
Box checked, moving on.
All the leaders in the Army have been leaders for a long time. They were around for the surge in Iraq and Afghanistan, and their main priority was to, fight and win the wars. But it's a different war now, and those are the people who are still in charge.
Well, how do you feel about that, everyone? It seems like there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than what we really know, because it seems, of course, that there's a lot that's covered up, and when that tends to happen, there's also things that are a lot bigger and possibly a lot scarier that are covered up that they really don't want you to know. So, without me ever being in the military, I really can't give any true foresight. I can't give any personal experience, but I will say that I will agree with the vast majority of this video. From what I've heard, from what I have lived through, you know, because the things that happen in the real world and in everyday life, this still exactly what happens in the military. So those two things crossing, you know, it's just it's a disaster waiting to happen, and it seems like that's what's happened. And hopefully they're doing something about it. I just don't know. Again, I can't really speak a whole lot on it, you know. This video was definitely way more than what I was expecting it to be. So if you have any experience with this, if you are wanting to share something or willing to share something, you know, that you've witnessed or seen, or you know how things are changed or how things are different or what's different wherever your military is, let me know in the comments below. I hope that you have a great day, great night, whatever time it is that you see this. Goodbye.